Good afternoon, everyone. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizing team for giving me this opportunity. Today, I'll be talking about the pediatric principles of pediatric resuscitations. These are my session objectives. So I'll be talking about the pediatric age group, pediatric assessment triangle, recognizing the critically ill child, basic life support and advanced life support. Not all, I will not go in detail and depth of these things, but the practical approach and the practical steps involved in these basic life and advanced life, I'll try to cover how to deal with those things, and a few one or two slides regarding post arrest care. So we all know that the pediatric chain of survival, it mainly emphasizes on prevention of emergencies, early CPR with the rescue breaths, and prompt EMS activation and effective EMS care, and obviously effective post-arrest care. So the pediatric patients differ from the adults in the way they are mainly of respiratory or hypoxic arrest rather than the primarily cardiac, which we seen generally in cases of adult patients. So these patients are mainly of respiratory cause or hypoxia, which is progressing to the cardiac arrest. So always the principle is to follow the safe approach, that is shout for help, approach with the care, and make sure that the environment is safe for both the resuscitator and the patient, and evaluate further. So that is the basic principle of our pediatric resuscitation. Coming to the pediatric age group, so there will be always a confusion and a fight between the two departments, the pediatric and the medicine department. One will tell that this is a pediatric patient, the other will tell that no, this is not a pediatric, this is an adult one. So always there will be a confusion. In that cases, we will be having a lot of confusion whether to follow a child guidelines or a adult guidelines. So to make it easy, there are guidelines have been given, like infant guidelines is applied to the infants younger than approximately 1 year age, and child guidelines apply to a child approximately 1 year to puberty. And they have also defined what is puberty also. So puberty is defined as the breast development in females and presence of axillary hairs in the males. Suppose if you find any of these signs are present, puberty signs are present, yes, you go ahead and resuscitate as if they are the adult patient. Coming to the pediatric assessment. So whenever the baby or the pediatric patient comes, we have to first assess what is the where it fits, what is the problem with the baby. So this can be divided into three. So one is first and foremost is we are going to give an importance to the respiratory, that is the work of breathing. Next will be the circulation, then will be the appearance or the central system, central nervous system, whether it is normal or we'll try to elicit the functionality. So we'll try to see one by one of these things. In case of the respiratory, so first and foremost is we have to look for the airway and the breathing patterns. So we have to look for whether the airway is patent, whether the audible breath sounds are there, whether we can feel the airway, so that there will be no obstruction to the airway, either upper or a lower airway. Then we have to look and evaluate whether the respiratory rate, whether it is adequate or inadequate, whether any tachypnea is there, hypopnea is there. So we are supposed to evaluate, and at the same time so look for any strain, increase in the work of breathing, whether any retraction, grunting, whether nasal flaring is visible, and look for the adequacy of the tidal volume by looking at the visible chest movement. So the bilateral air entry can be confirmed either clinically by looking at the chest expansion, or by looking at the quality of the cry which the baby is crying, or by the auscultation with the help of a stethoscope also. The presence of adequate oxygen in the blood can be assessed either by the color, looking at the color, whether any cyanosis is present, or if you have a pulse oximeter, you can evaluate with the pulse oximeter also. And next is circulation. Yes, in the circulation, look for the pulse rate, volume, look for the capillary refill time, whether it is less than 2 to 3 seconds. When is the patient has passed urine, what is the level of consciousness, blood pressure, skin color, all these can give a guide whether the patient is having adequate perfusion or not. Coming to the CNS or a conscious level, these can be given by a couple of scoring systems. So which what we follow is the first one is alert, verbal, pain, and the unresponsive score, and the pediatric Glasgow Coma Scale score. And the functionality of the brain, or the whether any functional or structural damage to the brain parenchyma is there, can be elicited by looking at the pupillate size, whether they are symmetrical, whether they are reactive to light, or any abnormal posturing or focal signs are present. Suppose the baby is throwing convulsions, it is a sign of a neurological problem. It could be because of the structural damage, or it could be a metabolic or a electrolyte imbalance. So it is an emergency and you have to recognize early. Once you have identified, okay, this patient is sick, this patient is ill, so then how we are going to resuscitate? Remember, the approach in the pediatric patient is not resuscitating after the cardiac arrest. It is prevention of the cardiac arrest. We have to resuscitate in a such a way that the babies or a patient should not land up with the cardiac arrest. So we are supposed to work towards that one. So this resuscitation requires multiple team members. It may be a nursing staff, it may be a doctors, it may be a senior consultant. So all these members are supposed to work in parallel and in coordination. It has to be a teamwork. Here we have to anticipate what is going to happen next. Suppose the patient is having some respiratory problem. Suppose the patient is already having hypotension. So next, what is going to happen? For example, patient is having already in the shock. Yes, next the patient may collapse and patient may have a cardiorespiratory arrest. So we have to be prepared for that one. So in that one, we have to prepare. Ideally, we have to prepare a checklist to support our decision making. And we have to plan in a such a way that, choreograph in a such a way that each allocated person for a particular task has to stand in a particular place so that he can adequately assess to perform his allocated task. For example, one person has given a job of intubating or maintaining or securing the airway. He should be standing at the head and side. Suppose other person who has been given a task of securing the IV line, he has to identify, he should assess and identify his comfort zone, whether he wants to take a secure IV line in the hand, lower limb, intraosseous, likewise, and he is supposed to go and stand that particular place, so that there will not be any disturbances between the performer for allocated particular task. There are some guidelines is given by the American Heart Association for pediatric as well as neonatal, both basic and cardiac arrest algorithms. I will not go in detail of these things. These are easily available in the website as well as they are there in the standard books. So what I emphasize is, yes, rather than looking only for the heart rate, the palpating and all those things, always look for the signs of life, whether the patient is opening eyes, whether the patient is crying, coughing, moving hand. So look for the signs of life rather than only relying on the pulse or a breathing pattern. And remember, safe approach. Make sure that you shout, assess with care, and make the scene very safe for both the resuscitator as well as the baby. So out of these things, so I'll be talking about the practical approaches of the few of the things. Like first, I will be talking about the airway and the breathing. So I will not go and in detail how actually we are doing. I will talk about some of the practical aspects of these things. For example, in case of airway and the breathing, the positioning of the patient is utmost important. So you have to give an adequate head and a body alignment so that there is no obstruction of the airway. There is no tongue fall. Suppose if you are suspecting any tongue fall and all those things, so you try to give a triple maneuver with a head tilt, chin lift, or a jaw thrust. Suppose there are any oral secretions are there, you try to suck the secretions gently without stimulating the airway reflexes. And always remember, if the baby is awake, the children is awake, they will likely to assume their optimal comfort position so that they can maintain both patent airway and the breathing. So do not disturb their optimal position. If you need to resuscitate further by whatsoever measures, you try to keep the baby in the same position and try to resuscitate. And whenever you are suspecting a tongue fall airway obstruction, so consider oropharyngeal and in the unconscious and nasopharyngeal in the semi-conscious child, and try to choose a appropriate sized airways. And nasopharyngeal airway, you try to avoid if you are suspecting a basal skull fracture or any coagulopathy. Coming to the oxygenation, you have to start the oxygen whenever the saturation is less than 94%, and your aim or target is to maintain somewhere between 94 to 98%. Do not target to achieve 100% oxygenation, and sustained saturations of 100% should be generally avoided. For any reason, if the low flow oxygen is not helping, it is babies are not responding, you can escalate with a high flow nasal cannula or a non-invasive, or you can intubate the patient also. But mere just to imagining and preemptive oxygen therapy, please do not do that one. Please do not give preemptive oxygen therapy in children without any signs or immediate risk for hypoxemia or a shock. Coming to the bag mask ventilation, so there are different size of bag and mask are available in the market. So these are available. You can use those for appropriate size and age for that matter, and use a proper seal around the nose and lips of the patient whenever you are ventilating, and give an adequate tidal volume over a sufficient long time so that there will be a visible increase in the or raise in the chest over a period of 1 second. So always avoid hyperinflation, and do not be in a hurry to intubate the patient. As long as you are ventilating the patient, it is fine. So it is as good as the advanced airway in place. So do not be in a hurry or for intubating the patient. If you can maintain with the bag and mask itself, yes, you continue till a definite requirement comes. And Cricut pressure should not be applied just to prevent the regurgitation, because applying the Cricut pressure itself will pose obstruction to the airway. Yes, tracheal intubation, oral tubes are preferred. Whenever feasible, try to use the cuffed ET tube, and try to monitor the cuff inflation pressure, as already the perfusion pressure is comparatively low, so which may lead to the tracheal ulceration or a necrosis on a long run. And coming to the ventilation, so the ventilation has to be based on the age, weight of the patient. So you have to set the respiratory rate, inspiratory time, and a tidal volume. So tidal volume can be somewhere between 6 to 8 ml of per kg of ideal body weight, and try to consider and compensate for the apparatus dead space, which can be minimized if you are using a pediatrics circuit which is suited for that particular age and weight, and try to give around 20 to 30 breaths per minute, so which is new for the infant and children, and look for normal chest raise, avoid hyperinflation as well as hypoventilation. Aim for normocapnia. To maintain the normocapnia, please rely on the PaCO2 rather than EtCO2. If you are aiming for the maintenance of the ICP and all those things, so please take the serial ABG. Do not rely on the EtCO2, which is unreliable. Suppose the patient is on a ventilator, either with a mask or the tracheal tube is there. All of a sudden, the patient deteriorates, hypoxemia sets in, the saturation comes down, the heart rate also coming down. So you should consider the mnemonic dopes. So D stands for the displacement of the tubes, the O for the obstruction of the tube, airway, circuit, and all those things. P for pneumothorax, and E for the equipment failure. Maybe the oxygen is empty, the tubings, the connections, there is a disconnections, walls are blocked, and S for the abdominal compartments. Coming to the chest compression, so always perform the chest compression on the firm surface, and please do not try to remove the clothes, and remove clothes only if they severely hinder the chest compression. Chest compression can be done, performed either by two-hand technique or with a two-finger technique with a one hand. In children older than 1 year, depending on size and hand span, use either one hand or two-hand technique. In case one hand technique is being used, you can stabilize the hand in a such a way that airway remains patent, and you can also stabilize the performing arm at the elbow to prevent the fatigability, so that the quality of chest compression will not get affected. And you are supposed to push at say around 100 to 120 per minute, and your depth is supposed to be at least 1/3 of the AP diameter, and compression should not be more than 6 centimeter, whether it may be a neonatal or adult, which can be roughly of a thumb length. So adult thumb length, which is say around 6 centimeters. Coming to the circulation, so the circulation, there it cannot be generalized. It has to be individualized. It has to be tailored based on the etiology, pathophysiology, age, the condition of the patient. So always remember the transition from a compensated state to a decompensation state. It will be very rapid and it is very unpredictable. So whenever you are resuscitating, especially the circulatory part, so you try to reassess very frequently and at least after every intervention. And always consider among other clinical signs, mean arterial pressures, if possible, trends in lactate, urine output. And if you are competent, you try to find out the IVC, the chamber dilatation, the contractility, ejection, the cardiac index, and all those things to aid and help you in the circulatory resuscitation. In a circulatory failure, the assessing the vascular line is the first and foremost important step. So the peripheral lines are the obvious first choice for the vascular assess. And whenever required, you can take help of ultrasound to guide the cannulation. And always remember the cannulation time has to be limited to less than 5 minutes or less than 2 attempts. And if any time, if you feel that I'm not going to get the IV, secure the IV line appears to be little difficult, directly go to the alternative ways. Do not waste the time. So the primary rescue alternative is intraosseous route, and whenever possible, try to provide a adequate analgesia before starting, either with the help of an injection ketamine or a fentanyl intranasally. Use properly sized needle. So rule of thumb is whatever the needle goes into the peripheral line will definitely go into the intraosseous route. So the trick is you have to remove the needle, the sheath and the needle you have to separate, and you have to poke only the needle into the bone, make a vent, then again put the needle back into the sheath and try to put the whole IV cannula now with a little gentle rotating manner, so that the catheter stays and goes inside, and afterwards you can remove the needle and you can use it. And always use a proper size needle for that particular age. And there are some problems with the intraosseous line, like infusion or a syringe pumps may not work properly, and you have to be careful and use the manual infusion itself, or whenever possible high pressure bag. And there are some drugs you cannot give, like adenosine, so you cannot give it through the intraosseous line, so you have to remember. And the blood sample, all the investigations are not possible, like all the electrolytes are not possible with this one. So you have to keep in this in your mind. So remember, this intraosseous line is the mere between a bridge between securing a definitive IV line, either peripheral or a central line, then the resuscitation, so that any emergency, anything is there, you can give. Patient will survive. Patient will get adequate the required drugs and fluids till you secure the definitive line. It is a bridge. Coming to the actual fluid therapy, so fluid therapies are mainly required in cases of shock. So we generally give the fluid boluses of 10 to 20 ml per kg body weight, and which can be repeated for up to 40 to 60 ml per kg body weight. And whenever you are giving a fluid bolus, so always reassess after each bolus. After each bolus, you try to assess how much you have given and try to avoid repeated boluses. And in any case, if you have to give repeated boluses, say around more than 3 times, try to consider the vasoactive drugs and respiratory support early on. Balanced crystalloids like ringer lactate, plasmalates are the first choice of bolus drugs, but normal saline can also be given as an alternative. In cases of sepsis, especially whenever there is a malaria and a dengue fever, which is now coming everywhere, so albumin is the second line of drug. And whenever there is a severe dehydration, gradual correction has to be done over a period of 6 to 8 hours, and you can give up to 100 ml per kg body weight. And blood products are only needed when blood values fall below an acceptable minimal value. Whenever there is a hemorrhagic shock, try to limit crystalloids to say around 20 ml per kg body weight maximum. Try to replace blood with the blood, like 1:1. And if you think that there is no associated brain injuries are there, you can try allowing a permissive hypotension also. And whenever there is a life-threatening hemorrhage is there, within first 3 hours of the resuscitation, you can try giving a tranexamic acid also. Whenever there is an isolated, moderated, traumatic brain injury is there, where GCS is 923, and there is no pupillary abnormalities are noted, you can give a tranexamic acid. You can give around 15 to 20 mg loading dose, maximum of 1 gram, and followed by infusion of 2 mg per kg per hour for at least 6 hours or until bleeding stops. Again, the maximum dose is 1 gram. Coming to the few lines about the vasoactive or inotropic drugs, you are supposed to start the vasoactive drugs as early as possible and titrate these drugs based on desired target mean arterial pressure or a systolic blood pressure. And noradrenaline and adrenaline are the first line of vasopressors. Dobutamine and milrinone are the first line of the inodilators. Dopamine should be considered only in setting where neither adrenaline or noradrenalines are available. And also use vasoactive drugs in case of hypovolemic shock, where there is a loss of sympathetic drive, such as during anesthesia or concomitant traumatic brain injuries. There are other additional therapies which you can give in case of septic shock, especially when there is unresponsiveness to the fluid and vasoactive drugs. So you can try giving a shot of hydrocortisone of 12 mg per kg body weight, and you can give 1 shot of a broad spectrum antibiotic. Of course, you have to take first obtain blood cultures and send it before starting the antibiotics. There are a few cases which present, especially in the traumatic RTA and all those things. So they present with the tension, either tension pneumothorax or massive hemothorax, or there are a few cases where they present with the pericardial tamponade also. So here, in cases of pneumothorax or a massive hemothorax, you can place a ICD safely at 4th to 5th intercostal space, just anterior to the mid-axillary line. In case of emergencies, the mid-clavicular line, second intercostal space still holds good. You can place a needle and you can do a needle thoracotomy also. For draining the pericardial tamponade, you need a ultrasound guided needle aspiration. A few lines about the hypoglycemia. So hypoglycemia, whenever there is a hypoglycemia, there is very mild symptoms will be present. You can maintain the glucose maintenance. Glucose can be given at a rate of 6 to 8 mg per kg per minute. And the correction also can be given through the oral route with oral rapid acting glucose, that is 0.3 grams per kg tablets. And whenever there is a severe hypoglycemia, say around less than 50 milligram per deciliter, you are supposed to give IV correction with the glucose. You can give either 10 or a 20% solution. So either 3 ml or 1.5 ml per kg body weight respectively. And try to monitor glucose every 10 minutes. Every 10 minutes, you try to monitor the glucose. And our target is to bring the baseline sugars, increase in the baseline sugars by 50 milligram per deciliter, or the random measurement. So it should cross more than 100 milligram per deciliter. These should be our goals to stop giving bolus. So once these goals are reached, suppose the patient sugars are say around 30. So you have given, now it is 80. So you can stop the bolus, continue with the maintenance dose. Suppose initially it was say around 50. So now it is around 100. So you can stop the bolus, you can continue the maintenance. Maintenance doses are need to be given because we have tied over the crisis, but the basal metabolism, catabolism, that is still persisting. We have not addressed till that one. So till we address that basic pathology or a catabolic state, we have to maintain the normoglycemia by giving the infusion. Coming to the few points about the defibrillator. The first and foremost complaint by the pediatric department, emergency department, the PICU is they don't have a pediatric defibrillator paddles. So there are some manufacturers where there will be a built-in pediatric paddles. Only thing is there will be one lock will be here, button kind of a thing. You need to push and slide the defibrillator, this one paddle, it will come out. So inside there will be a pediatric paddle, it will be available. So you have to look your defibrillator properly. Yes, it may be available also. And the standard sizes are adult 12 centimeter, pediatric 8 centimeter, and infant 4.5 centimeters are available. And yes, positioning is the anterior and the apex positions. And whenever there is non-availability of the pediatric paddles, you can use the adult paddle itself. You can place it on the anteriorly intermemory line and back at the interscapular region. In fact, you can apply the AED stickers also, the defibrillator paddle sticky stickers also at the same places, and you can defibrillate or give the shock to the patient. And always, whenever you are giving shock, you try to consider escalating doses. You can start with 2 joules per kg, and you can go up to 10 joules per kg body weight. In a non-responsive shockable rhythm, where you have already given 5 shocks, you can try adult dose also. Last topic or a last slides, a couple of slides. Post-resuscitation care. Here we are supposed to optimize the oxygenation and the ventilation. We are supposed to maintain the saturation somewhere between 94 to 98. So as I told you, do not target 100% saturation, and maintain the normocapnia. Try to maintain somewhere between 35 to 45. Rely on the ABG, not on the EtCO2. EtCO2 is not reliable. Okay. So next is we are supposed to optimize the cardiac output. So cardiac output, as you all know, that it is nothing but the stroke volume into the heart rate. So the stroke volume or to be maintained either with fluids or vasopressors, and try to avoid hypotension. improve the contractility with the use of inotropes and inodilators, maintain the heart rate very aggressively, treat any tachycardia or tachyarrhythmias or bradyarrhythmias aggressively, maintain adequate hemoglobin concentration. And when it comes to the optimizing the neurological outcome, try to treat aggressively all hypothermia, hypotension, hypoglycemia, acidosis, hypoxemia, aggressively treat the seizures. And mild hypothermia is very common in post-arrest cases, so it should not be aggressively treated. And whenever you are treating, first 5 days, try to maintain normothermia, say somewhere between 36 to 37.5 degrees centigrade for first 5 days, or maintain first 2 days continuous hypothermia. Temperature should be 32 to 34 degree, followed by next 3 days continuous normothermia of temperature 36 to 37.5. So this helps in neurological outcome. In conclusion, yes, the pediatric principles, it always applies a safe approach, and the primary cause will be always hypoxia or a respiratory cause. So always emphasize on the prevention of the arrest, and always emphasize on the quality care, quality of the resuscitation, and reversal of the spontaneous circulation is not the end, and always plan for the post-arrest care. You have to monitor and maintain the patient so that the neurological outcome, the better chances of survival will be there. Thank you. So any questions are there? So I'll be happy to take. Thank you.